Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms, and I'm back with my co-host, Dale. You can find us over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin or at Dynasty_Dale. Dale, how's it going? Good week 5?
Yeah, I am feeling great today. And it was a pretty good week 5. It was very, very interesting in fantasy to watch all the big scoring and to kind of watch some of the flubs I had. So overall, a pretty good week.
There you go. It was a terrible week for me. I was not happy this last weekend, but you win some, you lose a lot. That's what it feels like right now.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you guys have been following along the last couple of weeks, make sure you're following on YouTube or on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to the podcast. While you're there, if you don't mind, just leaving a review, leaving a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever you can to help with the algorithm to push the podcast to more people. Shoot, I don't even care if you do a thumbs down. Still, activity, hate comments are still comments. So, leave some comments. Just help us out here. But today we are excited. We're going to be talking through our start and sits from last week. Then we're going to touch on a new subject today, and that's going to be the concept of the new age running backs, because we'll break it down. I don't want to spoil it too much. So we're going to be talking about running backs a lot today, and then we're going to finish it off with a Week 6 preview or Week 5 recap for the ERI Dynasty League. Couple trades over there, so make sure you stay tuned to see what those were. So that said, let's kick it off. Last week was great for me in my picks of the week, starts of the week. Not so great for you. I believe you went 0-3. What a loser. Meanwhile,
Yeah,
I'm
I
over here at
know.
2-1. Took the lead on the season. I am 6-6 on my suggested starts, which I will actually take because I'm trying to pick some of those outside the box guys. You could take the Ramondre Stevensons, like somebody over here, for this upcoming week, or you could go with my guys who are a little bit more volatile, but still somehow paying off because I am 6-6 on the season. You're 5-7, so you're one behind me. But let's hear who remind me, who were your picks last week?
So the first one I had was J.K. Dobbins. He was he was oddly kind of scripted out. I don't know what was going on with the Ravens on Sunday night. I thought he was going to have a lot more play and a lot more play in the red zone, and unfortunately that didn't happen.
Yeah, that game was kind of weird. I guess Cincinnati has a good run defense. I didn't really realize that until that game.
I
I
didn't
haven't
either.
watched too many of them, but goodness, it's actually pretty decent.
Yeah, and then I had A.G. Dillon. I don't know what happened overseas there. I don't know what's going on with the Packers. I have no idea. Um,
Yeah,
like it was a
did
down
you?
week for it was a down week for Aaron Jones, down week for A.G. Dillon,
Did you?
and they
So
barely got any carries, or it was odd.
real quick, so did you watch that game at all?
I did, yeah.
So that game, I guess I didn't realize until that game, and I guess I subconsciously realized this, but unless you're actively thinking about it, you don't realize this. That was Green Bay's first ever London game in all these years. They've never done a London game, and the funny thing is, when I was watching that game, man, Aaron Rodgers just looked like so annoyed to be over there in general, because he, like, every bad play, he was just like rolling his eyes, scoffing constantly. I was like, man, you're getting paid like $49 million this year. Buck it up, sweetheart. You gotta pull yourself together a little bit here.
No, I agree with that, and I don't really know what's going on in Green Bay. Like they haven't played very well. They're not gelling. I think it's a lot on Rodgers here. Like I just think he's either not with it or he's not smoking enough of that stuff that he was doing to kind of get vibing with Adams last year.
Needs more ayahuasca or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
That's what.
something. Yeah.
But yeah, so that was a rough one. Yeah, that was just a down performance in general. And then your last one was the Mountaineer, right? Will Disley.
Yeah. It was Will Disley Big Montana. I was trying to go out on a limb, and the limb fell off. It was not even it was eh. It was meh for the tight end position, but
Goodness.
I mean, there were some big games in the tight end position this week, um, with the ugly Taysom Hill disaster. I'd like to call. I don't know. Like it makes
That's
me want
so
to
annoying.
vomit.
He's not a
It's
tight end. It's
extremely annoying.
so annoying,
No,
man. He has one target on the season. Like it's
yeah,
whatever.
it's atrocious.
But yeah, I get it. I mean, at least if he was like a flex player, you know what I mean? At least he's taking up a
Hmm.
flex, not a tight end spot. But it feels more
Agreed.
fair at that point. Like legitimately, I think his role for an offense should just be flex because that is what he
Yes.
does. He is a flex player. That seems like the ultimate solution, but nobody ever talks about it. But yeah, conversely, my starts of the last week were Zach Wilson, George Pickens, and Damian Pierce. George Pickens snuck into top 24, so I get to count that one. 2
Mm.
and 1. Damian Pierce with the new beast mode. And real quick, what are your thoughts on Damian Pierce? So I was talking about this with somebody in one of our leagues that we share, and he's trying to sell Damian Pierce. And I asked him, I said, why are you trying to sell Pierce? Because he traded Jalen Waddle earlier this year for Nick Chubb and Damian Pierce, right? And I said, why are you trying to sell Damian Pierce? He's a hit case. Like he's a success story. He's what you're looking for with a cheaper throw-in option. When they hit, you want that for Damian Pierce. So like, why try and sell him? And this is where I think the misconception in Dynasty is really because he was basically saying, well, now I can just flip him for more stable picks and I can get a younger wide receiver. I'm like, dude, you sold Waddle for Damian Pierce. Like what? I
Yeah.
don't understand the some people, it feels like they just try and trade to trade. And like, I can be victim of this as well at times. Right. But sometimes you have to have and this is why I always preach to have a strategy in mind when you're making these trades, because you got to have some sort of goal in mind, because otherwise you're just trading and you have no end game, because now you're trading Damian Pierce for another wide receiver. You're not going to get a Jalen Waddle level wide receiver. So it's like, what are we doing here? Just if it was me, and he's in kind of a rebuild right now in that league. So just sell Nick Chubb. Like, if you want a good wide receiver, sell Nick Chubb. I don't understand why you're selling Damian Pierce. And maybe this is the misconception on Damian Pierce that I'm not seeing. I think this guy's going to be good for a couple years now. I mean, he's a decent draft capital for a team that doesn't really value, they value the picks very highly. So the fact that they were shoot, they wasted a third round pick on Davis Mills and gave him 2 years for it. So Damian Pierce is looking good. They're going to give him like a lifetime contract at this point in his career. So, Damian Pierce is the success story that I think that a lot of people overlook. You know what I mean? You want to get that from a later round running back. He was a second round pick in most rookie drafts, or even a third round in some of them. So you want that case. You don't want to be spending, if you can avoid it, you don't want to spend like the 103 on Kenneth Walker. You know what I mean? Like Damian Pierce might be just as good as Kenneth Walker, and you got him 2 rounds later. So I just don't really understand. What are your thoughts on Damian Pierce right now?
Uh, s- I mean, it's coming into the season. I wasn't a big fan of Damian Pierce. I thought he was very overhyped for a really really bad Houston Texans team. So I get the hype, but also I feel like I'm just kind of off on Pierce. Like I feel he's he's gonna be kind of like James Robinson, but not as good.
I feel like he's better than
My
James Robinson, to be honest with you. And here's the reason why. So, this is the only thing with the Texans, and I get it. They're not that good. They were the last team to get a win in the NFL. The problem with the Texans is not here. It's the quarterback position. I like Davis Mills, but he seems like a career backup at this point. Like he just doesn't have what it takes to be a starter, which is fine. Not everybody can make it. I can't even make it in like Pee Wee football. So, like not everybody can make it to be one of the top 32 guys in the NFL. Fully understand that. But when you look at the coaching staff and you got Lovie Smith there, the defense has been pretty good. Like, say what you will about the Houston Texans, their defense has been sneakily pretty good so far this season. You know, they in week number 1 they held Indy to 3 points for like 90% of the game, ended up tying 20-20. In week number 2, Houston, I'm just trying to find them here, held Denver to 16. Now, whether that's Denver or Houston, hard to say. Week 3 held Chicago to 23 points. You know, they haven't given up a ton of points. 20 to the New York, or wait, no, that was Chicago. Let's see. In week number 4, trying to find them here. Sleeper does not have the best. Okay, they did give up 34 to the Chargers, so I guess not the greatest. But then this week they held Jacksonville to 6 points. Jacksonville had been looking like they were kind of on the upswing. So I don't know. I think that the defense is better than people kind of anticipate right now for Houston. Is kind of getting things together. They've got Lovie Smith, a defensive-minded head coach. They like Dameon Pierce, and he's been successful in the running game. And what do we know about defensive head coaches? If they can run it and establish the run, they are going to do it. And I think that they're not going to fire Lovie Smith at the end of this year. I think that the PR hit that they would take for doing that, you know, after whoever it was last year, I forget that's how short notice,
David Culley.
Yeah, David Culley. So they got so much flack for firing him after 1 year. If they do the same thing to Lovie Smith, the PR is going to be so bad for this team that's trying to recover from the Deshaun Watson thing. So I think Lovie Smith has at least 2 years with this team, and Dameon Pierce is going to be valuable. They have a good offensive line. They're going to get a rookie quarterback next year. And what is a rookie quarterback's best friend? Checkdowns. Tight ends, running back, checkdowns. So I personally, I just think that Dameon Pierce is worth it. That's just my thing. I don't know.
I get it, but I think they have enough picks in the upcoming drafts to get a better. I just don't think Dameon Pierce is.
But here's the thing.
And this is where that good.
This is where
I just don't see him as a RB2. You know, I mean, I mean,
he could be like 15 to 20 in that range. But but here's the thing. So this is where I think a lot of fantasy people don't, like fantasy managers, and they don't understand like the real world aspect as much as we probably should, you know. Think about it as like running a business. You invested a 4th round pick into a running back. He's been very good. He's been everything you wanted him to be. I get you have a bunch of other picks, but why would you waste one? Like, if you're going into your rookie draft, if you have, Patrick Mahomes, and, I don't know, so let's say someone like Trevor Lawrence is your quarterbacks in a 1-quarterback league. Are you really going to waste a top pick? Even if you have 5 first-round picks, you're going to waste one on a quarterback next year? Probably not. You're just going to try and get all the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, whatever you need to fill out your team. That's the thing with the real NFL. If Dameon Pierce is producing for what they invested in him, above what above kind of what everyone was expecting from him, why would they go and get another pick? Yes, it's a good class. Yes, they could get another guy, but it's kind of burning money. You know what I mean? Like, why do it? It's not the most desperate need. And that's the one thing, like, I just think it's overlooked a little bit. That's all I'm saying. So Dameon Pierce, he's very interesting. We'll just put it at that. Take it what you will. Here's 2 sides of the coin. Dale does not like Dameon Pierce as much. He doesn't believe in him long term. I kind of like him. I think that he's a success story. I wouldn't be selling him personally. That's just me. But, let me know your thoughts over on YouTube. Perfect chance to give us a comment. So let us know. All right, Dale, who are your starters this week? Let's hear what you got.
All right. So the first one I have is kind of a layup, which I know Calvin is a huge fan of.
I actually really like this guy.
Yeah. I am going to go with Ramondre Stevenson. Damien Harris got injured. They're playing against Cleveland, who gave up a bunch of yards to Austin Eckler last. And they're going to be playing. So the Patriots should be playing Bailey Zappi
yet again. Zap.
Again. Which I heard today that like Belichick is open to having a QB competition with him and Mac Jones, which I think is hilarious.
No,
That's
he's
beside
not.
the point.
No, he's
I
not. He's just
I
saying that.
know, I know he is, but I think it's hilarious. But
That's like Gino.
I mean,
Did you see that news report that Locke was nipping at Gino's
yeah,
heels? It's just
yes, I
hilarious.
saw that.
No, he's not.
But
I can
yeah,
tell you, he's
yeah,
not.
yeah. But on Stevenson, I think he played like 90% of snaps last week,
Yeah,
and I think he's going to do that again. I think he is a smash play. I think he's going to be a high end RB1 this week, because I think they're going to be going back and forth with Cleveland, and I really expect him to get a lot of yards on the ground, some yards in the air. I don't really expect him at I don't expect him to have like an Austin Eckler like performance, but I think he's going to have a very very good.
yeah. I agree with you 100% here. I like him a lot. My first guy is going to be Eno Benjamin with the Arizona Cardinals, and Eno is someone that's a little bit more interesting. So Arizona, they are playing, if I can find the matchup, Seattle. Seattle's defense has been very bad against the running backs last couple weeks. James Conner has an injury. All the other running backs on this team are also injured. I think Darrell Williams is out. James Conner is out. They've been adding people to the practice squad like crazy these last couple of days, which, they're saying right now that James Conner has a chance of playing this week. He's kind of day to day at this point. But if you're adding that many, just like the Alvin Kamara news from a couple weeks ago in London, you got to pay attention to who these teams are signing to their practice squad, because it more than likely indicates that they think that James Conner's not going to play, so they want a couple more bodies ready for game day. So I think that if James Conner misses, Eno Benjamin, he's not the best. He's not the most talented guy, but every game this year, except for one, he's averaged 4 targets through the air with less than 30% of snap share. You bump that up last week, he had 54%, 8 carries on the ground. Not a great day against Philly, but it is Philly, But he still had 14 points last week. I think that against Seattle, there's definitely a lot of opportunity there. If he's playing about 60 to 70% of snaps, and I don't think that's sustainable for a long period of time, but for one game specifically, I think he can do that. And, looking at Eno Benjamin throughout his career, he's a decent carry. He has some burst to him. He's been able to produce, especially this year. 2 of his games, he's averaging over 7 yards per carry. And then you add in the passing work as well. I think that there's going to be opportunity there for maybe 7, 8 targets in this game if he's playing that high of a snap percentage. Maybe 13, 14 rushes on the ground. It's just, and against a bad defense, I like that quite a bit.
No, I do agree with that on Benjamin. I think he's a pretty solid RB2 start, and I think you'll probably get another check in your win column there.
Yeah, all right, let's go. And one thing to say too is it's a little bit easier to get a higher scoring running back this week, because a lot of the good guys are out on bye this week. Damian Pierce, Tennessee Raiders. Who else is it? The Lions, and there's one other team. Oh, I'm blanking on it. I don't think they matter very much. Houston, that's the other one. Did I say Houston?
Yeah.
Raiders, Tennessee Titans, Houston, and the Lions. So there's your 4 teams on bye this week. That's a lot of good running backs in that 4 teams, So it will be a little bit easier to score higher as a running back this week, but I do still quite like, Benjamin, just because of the opportunity that he's going to have this week. So that said, who's your number 2 guy?
So I have Alec Pierce of the Colts. He's been playing a lot better here recently. I think in his last 2 games, he scored double-digit points. He had about 60% of snaps last week, compared to 44 in week 4. He is gaining the trust of Matt Ryan, and I think he's going to take a lot of pressure off of that offense. I think they're going to be without Jonathan Taylor again this week potentially. So he's going to be very very important for a pretty decent Jacksonville defense that they're playing. So I think he's been playing a lot better, and I think he's going to be a pretty solid start. Like, I don't really expect him to go off, but I wouldn't be shocked if he scored. Um, and then he had like 15 or so points again.
Yeah, definitely. So I like that. You stole all my guys here this week. I
Let's
like
try
Pierce
it.
quite a bit. And again, Matt Ryan sucks, but if they can get Pierce involved, I like him quite a bit. I was higher on him. He was a second round pick, and he's somebody to definitely be keeping an eye on. I was not a big Michael Pittman guy, and I was a little bit higher on Damian Pierce or Alec Pierce. Damian Pierce. Too many Pierces. Too many names are starting to overlap in the NFL. It's starting to get crazy. But yeah, I do like Pierce's opportunity this week, and if he can continue to take a step forward, there's some big opportunity there for him in this offense.
Absolutely.
All right, my number 2 guy is someone that try not to laugh, try not to spit out your drink here, but it's someone that I quite like, and he's been left for dead, it feels like, in Dynasty, and that is Darius Slayton with the New York Giants. And Darius Slayton is an interesting guy. So, he was, I forget what round he was drafted in. I think it was like a 4th or 5th rounder a couple years ago. And he has shown some promise with Daniel Jones. Same draft class as Daniel Jones. He's been okay the last couple years, but never really consistent, on a bad Giants offense, but the Giants have been bad for a while now. He's been banged up, new coaching staff. He has not been utilized yet this year. Week 1, he was a healthy scratch in week 1. Week 2, he played 1 snap. Week 3, he played 20% of snaps. Week 4, against Chicago, this is where all the injuries are starting to rack up. He had 60% of snaps, only saw 2 targets in that game. But here this last week against Green Bay, again, injury at the wide receiver position. He had 54% of snaps, but he had 7 targets for 80 yards. Him and Daniel Jones have always had a good connection. And, when Daniel Jones is on and him and Darius Slayton are connecting, usually it comes with 2 touchdowns. It's kind of Darius Slayton's MO is when he gets 1, he gets 2. But this week he's against Baltimore. Baltimore has been very bad against wide receivers so far this year. You take out, week 5 against Cincinnati, which was just a divisional game, that nobody could really get their offenses moving. Been able to do the rest of the year. I think that there's definitely a lot of opportunity here for Darius Slayton on a very battered wide receiver core for the New York Giants. I mean, you look at the guys. Wan'Dale Robinson injured, might be practicing this week, but by the end of the week he could be out again. We have no idea. Richie James, who the hell is that? Kadarius Toney, injured. David Sills, injured. Kenny G, nowhere to be seen, probably injured. Who knows? Kenny, what, you broke my heart. Oh, I hate you. But then basically the entire offense runs through Saquon Barkley. Green Bay tried to stop that last week. They were not able to. They were able to stop him. They were able to contain him early. But Baltimore's defense is not what it kind of was expected to be at the beginning of the year. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. So I'm rolling with Darius Slayton. And again, Dale's picking on these, walk in the park guys over here, these Alec Pierces and these Ramondre Stevensons, and I'm giving you gems like Eno Benjamin and Darius Slayton there.
No, well, on Slayton, like I do like it. Like Daniel Jones has to throw the ball to somebody other than Barkley every play. Has to, So I mean, it's probably either going to go to Slayton or Richie James, which I don't know who the hell he is either. So
Beats me.
he was yeah. So so like I do expect Slayton to at least play a part in it. I know that there's been a lot of injuries in the Baltimore secondary. They've just been beat up the past couple years in the back end, unfortunately. So I think he could have a decent game this week.
Yeah, it all depends who Marcus Peters. That's the number 1 cornerback for Baltimore, right? Do you think he's going to be on him, or do you think he's going to be on someone like Richie James, David Sills, one of those 2 guys? I would have a hard time believing it'd be on Slayton, right?
I mean, I could see him being on Slayton, because because of the matchup and stuff like that. Like I
Yeah.
don't,
He is the bigger threat kind of guy, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
but we'll see. We'll see. I could definitely be wrong on this one, but he's somebody that I was just trying to, give a little bit of hype behind. So we'll see how that goes. And by the way, I was thinking about this while you're talking. So Richie James, you know what he should do? He should get a name change. He should name himself Rick James. It's so close. It's right there. Then people will actually care about him. People would like to cheer for Richie James if he just renamed himself Rick James. I'm Rick James.
Absolutely.
But all right.
No, I 100% agree with that, and that would be very, very New York City of him.
Yes, it would. All right. So who's your last guy for this week? We'll start rolling here a little bit quicker.
Yeah. So Justin Fields. I am Ohio State homer. I think Fields is finally playing a lot better. He's playing to his potential. And they actually played pretty well against Minnesota. I was kind of worried in the beginning how things were, but like he's been slinging the ball really well, been getting decent wide receiver play. I mean, as long as he has like better than a wide receiver 3 to throw to,
yeah.
I think he should be really good. I definitely believe in the talent, and he's very, very mobile. So like last week, like he actually had a touchdown run that was called back on this crazy Mike Vick looking play.
Mm-hmm.
So so like I expect him to be running for his life and trying to make plays where a lot of other quarterbacks won't be able to make those. So,
yeah.
I do expect him to have like a QB1 performance.
So he was a QB12 last week, so there was that. But the only downside for Justin Fields, again, it's starting to pick up, but 21 attempts in the passing game last week, 8 on the ground. It's a lot of, just good production is what you're looking for from him. But the one thing I will say, you look at the first 4 weeks, and again, looking back on what we know now after a month, after 5 weeks in, San Francisco, great defense. Rain game as well, kind of a mess there. Green Bay, pretty good pass defense, not the best rushing defense as we saw this last weekend. In the last couple of weeks, Green Bay's been getting gashed on the ground so far this year. Houston, same thing, been getting gashed on the ground mostly. A better secondary. I talked about that earlier this episode. And then the Giants, they're just an overall solid defense right now. It seems like I know that the Giants are 4-1 and nobody really believes in them, but they're playing well. They are playing well. You got to give them credit. They have no wide receivers and they're still winning these games. So the Giants defense has been much better. So the first game against a subpar defense in Minnesota, it's not really up to what you're kind of expecting. Justin Fields looks a little better. So the only thing I will say is he's really got to get his fumbles in control. He had 2 fumbles again this week. So you just really got to start getting that in control. Doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, so that's great. But yeah, doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns either. So that's not great.
Well, yeah. Well, it's for Fields. It's just been rough because the O-line is horrid.
Yeah.
And we talked about that last
weapons,
week.
The weapons suck.
Yeah,
they do.
It's the weapon. It's the whole team around him sucks. So like he's just running for his life.
Right.
So like I think he's gonna play a lot better in the coming weeks, and hopefully they stick with him. So like for instance, like I saw this mock draft with PFF, which I don't always like to believe.
Oh, they want to replace him so fast.
And it's not funny. And I'm just like the Bears aren't going to do that because they traded so much capital.
I know. They've been talking about replacing him for 2 years, like since the offseason, essentially. Before the season even started, they were talking about it. And it's like, yeah, that PFF they've got hot takes.
Yes.
But all right, so my last guy, just to finish up here, I am actually going with the Danger Witch, Russell Wilson, and kind of putting my stamp of approval here on him. So it comes out this last week. It was one of the worst football games I've ever had to watch in my life against Indianapolis. That was so bad. It was the worst game ever. But after that game, we find out that Russell Wilson has a shoulder injury that nobody knew about, that he's been dealing with for 5 weeks, and just decided not to do anything about it until now. He was trying to kind of deal with it on his own, work it out in the games, and that has not worked out. So they went and got him a shot in his arm. Now, long term, is that going to fix Russell Wilson? No. But what I think and why I like him this week specifically is, one, he's playing the Chargers. Chargers defense has not been what we really expected this year. It's been kind of bad, to be honest with you, which is surprising. It's looked really good in week 1, if I remember right, and then ever since then, it's just kind of gone further and further downhill. So the Chargers defense is not that great. It's a divisional game, but Russ is new to the division, so it's not really a divisional game for him. He's not really going to care that much. And that shot, what it's going to do is, if you've ever had shots like the painkillers and stuff, the best thing about them is they immediately remove pain, and they make you feel better right away. And it's after a couple of days and after a week or two that the pain kind of creeps back in, and that's where you kind of experience those chronic pain situations. It creeps back in. I think that shot is going to help him a lot, and his deep ball should be a lot better in this game against the Chargers specifically. So if we can see Russ turn it back a little bit in this game against a not great defense, with a little bit of medical assistance in the shot, I like him a lot. We've all talked about it nonstop. This offense is too talented to look this bad. So I think that this is going to be a good get-right game. I don't know if it's sustainable. The Jets in Jacksonville, maybe it is. Maybe the shot will fix Russell Wilson, but, I think that him and this offense are going to get back on track, and this is a good matchup to do it. And, say what you will about the Denver Broncos. I know it has not been pretty football, but it's a whole new staff, coaching staff, quarterback, everything is almost brand new. They are going to need a little bit of time, and, like I said, I think this is the perfect matchup for them to kind of show a little bit of signs of life and get this a little bit back on track. They'll probably still lose this game. I think that the Broncos are going to lose a shootout. I think the Chargers are probably going to win like 28-24 or something like that. But I think that there's going to be opportunities, and you get in the red zone. Russell Wilson is probably going to have a couple touchdowns this week. He's got 4 touchdowns on the season. That is not sustainable with these weapons. So better days are ahead for Russell Wilson, and I think this is one of those weeks.
I agree with that. Like, as long as he plays better than he did last week, which I would hope he would, because that game was abysmal. I didn't even watch it because I knew it was going to be so bad. Honestly, like, I was just not going to stay up for that mess.
Yeah, it was not pretty.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad, and like, he has to play better. He has to.
All right, so that's our starts of the week. Again, let us know your thoughts, and we will recap it again next week and see how people, how we do, whether I can, with my bold takes. I will say, this week you have a good chance to catch it up, because I got some bold takes for sure. So, all right, so that said, let's jump into the next portion, which is going to be the running back discussion that I want to do here, and that is going to be talking about the next age of running backs. So the reason why I want to talk about this is, if you look over on, and I'm using the Dynasty League Football running back rankings, Dynasty ADP. So this hasn't been fully updated so far. It's ADP for the month of September. So, it's not caught up to the first 5 weeks of the season. So take this with a grain of salt. But if you look at the running backs in the top 20, top 24, there are currently 9 running backs over the age of 26, 1 running back over the age of 25, which is Saquon Barkley, and another 5 running backs over the age of 24, which means they'll be 25 next season. So there are a lot, and that's out of 24 players. That means 9 players are, 23 or younger right now in Dynasty ADP. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this with you, Dale, is because either there's a massive misconception because we've talked about it for years. There is an age cliff for the running back position. It is usually 26 years old. After 26, you're basically worthless. Look at Ezekiel Elliott. He hit 26 and disappeared. But then you got guys on the top 10 still who are over 26. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook. These guys are still producing pretty well for being older. Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones. So my thoughts are, when do you think is the next age of running backs? Because, you know, if all of these guys over 26, 27 do hit that cliff, which is possible, that's 9 guys that are going to have to be replaced in the top 24. Do you think it's going to be the 2023 draft class, 2024, or is it some of the guys that are out there already are going to start to take a step forward? And there's guys on here that are criminally low. Like, I will say Josh Jacobs outside the top 24 is just criminal based on what he's been doing the last couple of weeks. Dude is so good.
I do agree with that. You know, on Jacobs, I'm not a big Josh Jacobs fan, but you know, like
he has looked so good.
He's looked very good. So like with some of those guys, you know, I do expect them to kind of hit the cliff. Like especially like with Derrick Henry, you know, I could see him being there for a couple more years, but it's just gonna take a toll. One person I'm really worried about that's kind of young is Najee Harris. Actually,
oh my goodness, yeah,
I am very very off. I don't want anything to do with Najee. I think in Pittsburgh that Tomlin's going to go with I think it's going to be a little bit more of a split compared to, you know, like 90-10.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of thing. I mean, it still might be 80-20, but still, you know, I don't think he's ever going to get the same production that he did last year.
Yeah, that's the risk with Najee. I mean, he's going to be 25 before the end of the year. He is an old running back. Same with, you know, for being so young in his NFL career. Same with Ramondre Stevenson. Him and Najee are the same age, and I think they're the same draft class as well. Just older prospects that came out there. So for example, we got Christian McCaffrey's top 10, Saquon Barkley top 10, Najee, top 10, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, and Joe Mixon. All of those guys are going to be 25 next year or higher. Now, you look at the running back rankings for the next couple years, and these are Devy rankings, so these are always subject to change. But you got someone like Bijan Robinson coming out next year, Travion Henderson with Ohio State, Jahmyr Gibbs with Bama next year. Henderson, by the way, is 2024. Now, the one risky thing with these guys, too, before we get too far into it, all these guys that are 2023, 2024, it's not guaranteed. They can always go back to college, especially with the new NIL deals. You know, you can get your payday in there before you go into the NFL and get just used and abused. Where in college you're usually the cream of the crop essentially before you go to the NFL. But Jahmyr Gibbs for Alabama is number 3. Zach Evans with Mississippi is number 4. He's next year as well. Sean Tucker next year. Nicholas Singleton is 2025. So we got a couple guys there in that class, but that's here in the top 10. You've got, this is where after the top 5, you start to get into 2024 with Braylon Allen, Raheem Edwards, Will Shipley. So there's a few guys next year, you know, it's known as a very good running back class. You got 4 guys in the top 5 here for Devy rankings: Bijan, Gibbs, Zach Evans, and Sean Tucker. And then you got a lot of guys down here in the, you know, the 10 to 20 range with Blake Corum, Tank Bigsby, Devon Achane, Texas A&M. I'm not exactly sure. I don't watch enough college, as you can tell. Jace McClellan here. Israel Abinakanda. I butchered that. I know that. Deuce Vaughn. Yeah. There's a lot of guys in next year's draft class that are pretty highly ranked in the Devy. So I guess, do you think that next year's class is going to be the one that finally pushes these old guys off the cliff?
I would say yes and no. I know that answer is very wishy-washy, uh, but but with like the running back position, it's so hard to find that that um, franchise cornerstone running back because they've
Mm-hmm.
been playing. It's just really hard to find that guy.
Yep.
So I mean, like for instance, like I can see Robinson being that guy, but I think it all depends where he's drafted at. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's for instance, like if he gets drafted by Philly, I think that
Ooh.
could be that could
Ooh.
be very very fun. That could be very very fun with him and Hurts.
He'll get drafted by Baltimore, don't worry.
Probably, and that's gonna make me cry because I love J.K. Dobbins. That's beside the point. I think right now that there are some guys in next year's draft that could be those guys, but there's always going to be the diamonds of the rough.
Yeah.
Um, like for instance, like I'm a big High State homer. Like there's Mike Williams, like he's played really well this year,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's like Muhammad Ibrahim the uh with Minnesota. Like he's played really well, but he's an older running back.
Sure.
I'm worried. I don't really like Deuce Vaughn because he's only 5'6". That's beside
Oh,
the point.
really? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yes. Yes. It's like he's 5'6". Like he's pretty much the same size as Darren Sproles was coming out of Kansas State.
That's tough in modern
So
NFL.
yes, it's very tough. So I'm looking at this class and it looks very very deep, but I don't know how many of these guys are gonna really hit.
Yeah, and that's the question. So essentially, if 2023 is not the savior that we all expect it to be, is 2024 going to be the one that by that time, you want to be vested essentially of the older running backs and invested in the new guys? Or so, and I guess the biggest question is, do we have a misconception? So I was telling you before the podcast that essentially Christian McCaffrey, he's 26 years old, and he's been very good this year for fantasy, like extremely good so far on a terrible team. Everyone has talked about how Carolina is bad, but you look at his PPR scoring through 5 weeks. 16 points, 18 points, 15 points, 26 points, 23 points. Like, he's been good. He's been very good.
Very, very solid. Very solid.
They've been trolling us with the injury updates every single week where they're just resting him on Wednesdays. They've had a lot of fun with that. But, he's been really, really good so far this year. But I can't even sell him for 2 firsts right now. Late first for next year's draft. And it's like, is there a misconception here where we're overvaluing these guys in 2023 and we're undervaluing some of these older guys, these air quote older guys who might still be productive for fantasy for the next couple of years? Like we talked about earlier, the running back age cliff is 26 years old, but Nick Chubb looks really good for going on 27.
Yes.
Derrick Henry looks really good for going on 29. Austin Eckler, really good. I have a feeling that these guys are going to have one or, they're going to finish the season pretty highly probably. And I think they're still going to be good next year. Maybe in 2025, 2024, that draft class, that's where we need to start, worrying about having the backup plan for these guys. But I just think that, if you need a running back, pay up for these guys because I think they're still difference makers. We've seen that this last couple of weeks. These guys have just been on a scoring explosion at the running back position the last couple of weeks. And, I think that there's just this misconception of when is that new age. Everyone kind of looks to 2023, but like you, I don't think it's the savior class. I think there's going to be 3-4 guys maybe, but again, in the top 24, there's 10 guys that are going to be 26 or older next year. There's 5 guys that are going to be 25 or older. So that is 15 of 24 that need replaced. If you got maybe 5-6 guys out of next year's class, that still leaves a massive hole in RB2 territory. So, again, we can make the argument for some of these guys to step up that are out there currently, you know, the Josh Jacobs, the Cam Akers, Miles Sanders, some of these guys. You know, Miles Sanders is a free agent. Maybe he goes to another team. Maybe he goes somewhere like, I don't know, just somewhere off the top of my head. Maybe he goes to the Chargers, you know, and is the Austin Eckler replacement, something like that. We have no idea what's going to end up happening, but just to throw out an example, that could be fine that he's going to cement himself as a top 24 guy, but we just need to be on the lookout for that, because a lot of people have been devaluing running backs pretty heavily in a lot of leagues that I've seen so far. And it's been pretty common almost across all of them through this year that it's been heavily devalued so far. And I think that is a mistake. I think that, you know, you still get your elite guys at the top, the Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Javonte, rest in peace, you know, Breece Hall, some of those guys. Those are probably the premier guys right now in terms of price. Saquon, Christian McCaffrey right behind those guys. Nick Chubb is probably in that range as well, Austin Eckler. But, you know, if you want one of those top 10 guys, you got to be willing to pay for them, or you got to be able to, you know, even a top 24 guy. I think that there's a big dip between 12 and 24, and you just got to either accept that and hope that next year can save you without a guarantee of that, or you just got to be able to invest in some of those top guys. So that's the misconception with the dynasty, you know, age that we're in right now. But there is some guys like Dameon Pierce, I think, is someone that, again, we talked about him earlier. The reason why I like Dameon Pierce long term, there's a lot of guys that are going to be leaving this top 24, and I think that he has staying power with what we've seen so far through the first couple games here this season. So, you know, that's why I like him a lot. And if, you know, a cheap option for good RB2 value over the next few years, with all of these guys starting to vacate out of the top, the RB2 or better, there's going to be a lot of production that, you know, we need guys to fill. So Dameon Pierce could be one of those guys. So let us know your thoughts on this. And it's not something that's really actionable, but I wanted to just bring it to people's attention because it's something that I've been struggling with in a lot of my leagues. And I wanted to just talk it over because, you know, it does seem like people are devaluing running backs like Nick Chubb. I know somebody in one of the leagues that we run together has been trying to sell him all season, basically. Nobody's willing, like his misconception on what his value is 2 firsts right now. Nick Chubb's not going to get you 2 firsts in 2023, but should he be worth a first and a second? Probably. Are people offering a first? Probably. So that middle ground there is kind of the tricky part. You know, maybe you got to lower your standards a little bit to that first and the second and get a deal done. But, you know, you gotta kind of be willing to move these guys, but also you gotta be willing to pay for them as well. You know, you can't just get these guys on the cheap. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then it also depends where you're at. Like if you're like if you're kind of I don't like to use the word tanking, but like if you're not a good team, you're just trying to sell some players off, you know, like I think that's a little different. Like if you're trying to get some of that value for him, you know, and just trying to be a little bit picky, but also trying to get something. But like if you're like a contender, like you need to try to pay up for these guys and try to get them while they're still, I don't want to say cheap, halfway affordable.
Yeah.
Because the problem I see is that people really like the shiny new toy in the rookie picks.
Yeah. Yep. And like, yeah, you look at next year, unless you're the 101, you're not getting Bijan Robinson. And Bijan Robinson is probably the only one in that group that I feel confident could be like kind of a Breece Hall, jump up to the top 5 dynasty rankings. The other guys, I think that they're going to probably jump around that 10 to 12, 15 range. But Bijan's the only one that's going to jump that high. So if you don't have the 101 or you don't think you're going to have the 101, like go get, if you're a rebuilding team, buy an elite asset or a young guy. You know, some of those guys that are young, because they're going to be the Damian Pierces, the Josh Jacobs, who's going to have quite a few more years probably in the league. Someone like a J.K. Dobbins, who hasn't been that great so far, but there's promise there. Kenneth Walker, some of these guys that are not the elite options, or you buy an elite. If you're in full rebuild, go buy a Jonathan Taylor, a DeAndre Swift, a Javonte Williams now after the injury, a Breece Hall. Those are the guys you should be targeting if you want to pay for a guy that you know is going to be around for a while. The other guys, there's a little bit of risk with them. The Damian Pierces or the Kenneth Walkers, we talked about that. There's a little bit of risk with those guys, but they should be in that range for their floor is basically guaranteed as a top 24 running back for the next few years. So go get one of those guys. If you're a contender, go buy one of those mid-range guys, the Aaron Jones, the Austin Ecklers, the Dalvin Cooks, one of those guys. And if you're in full rebuild, sell anybody that's over 26. Like, I get it, they might still have a value for a couple more years, but if you're in rebuild this year, by the time they play next year, if they're over 26 now, they'll be 27 next year. You'll be just finishing, hopefully, your rebuild at that time. You want to be done with your rebuild at that time. That'll be their last season, so you're not going to get nearly as much value from them then as you will now. So just sell them now and just, look to rebuild with those future guys. But, just some thoughts on the running backs. That said, we can wrap that up and jump into the recap for week number 5 for the ERI league here. So, any other thoughts on the running backs before we jump over?
Not really. Just on the rookies, like, you just need to be aware of like who's having good production in college. Like, you have to watch out for the age. Is just the big thing.
Yeah, that's why Najee was such a trap, man. He was such a trap. I told so many people last year, and people called me crazy because he did finish really well last year, to be fair, but he was 24 last season. He was 24 last season. I was like, what? There was somebody that bought him in the ERI league, the guy that has Najee right now. And I was like, why are you getting him over Javonte or like Breece, or I forget who was last year's draft class? Najee, Javonte, and Kenneth Walker. Or no, who was the third one last year? I'm blanking. It wasn't ETN, was it? It was ETN. I told him he should win ETN. Well, that one did not pan out as well. But, I was just like, why are you investing so heavily in a 24-year-old guy when you're in a rebuild? It's like not the best idea. So, all right. So that said, let's get into the Week 5 recap for the ERI League. And real quick, there were 2 trades in the league last week. So the first one happened before the game, so we'll cover that one now. The other one will wait till after we get done with the recap, and we can go through that one. So the first trade, Dan actually is a huge George Pickens fan, so he was working on that trade all last week, asking my opinion on it, and finally he traded his 2023 first and Darnell Mooney for George Pickens from Eric, and I like it a lot for Dan. I really like George Pickens. My whole thought process was this, and I talked about this with Dan earlier this week. If you're Eric, what do you gain by selling George Pickens now? You know what I mean? Like, Eric wants to contend now. That 2023 first is great on paper, but it does not help you. George Pickens is a stud, man. He's going to be an elite wide receiver 1. Like, I truly believe George Pickens is on the ascension. And Darnell Mooney's nothing this year. That first is great next year, but I just didn't understand it from Eric's perspective. And I like the value. Like, on paper, it's fine. It's not bad value, but I just didn't understand the strategy behind it because, like, you can use George Pickens now. I want to use George Pickens now. You know what I mean? Especially if I'm trying to contend. So,
absolutely.
That's the only thing with that. I don't know. Like, I just feel like Dan gets so many cheap trades for these young wide receivers, and it's like, why are we doing this, man? Charge him 2 firsts for that. I would charge him more, but I'm a jerk, so. What are your thoughts on that trade?
I do hear that. I mean, I really like it. I think it's very appropriate for like how this 23 class could end up. I feel it's very top heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like 22's class where where like it's the top 5 or 6 picks are pretty solid, and then after that it kind of
Peters out.
like there's a tier break.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do like it for that, and Mooney's not really gonna move the meter too much.
He was a
So
throw-in.
yeah.
He was who Dan was probably going to
So
cut just to make room for Pickens.
exactly.
But
So like I think that's a good pick,
yeah.
a good
So
pickup for him.
all right. Well, yeah, like I said, I just didn't understand it, but good for Dan. George Pickens looks like a stud, man. I like George Pickens so much. So, all right. That said, week number 5, we'll fly through these a little bit here. So, first week, I will say I lost again. Was kind of expecting it. Went against Ryan. Ryan was the league leader in points this week, but my team finally showed up, except for the quarterback position, obviously. But, my guys actually performed pretty well. I was the 4th highest scorer, just barely, because Travis Kelce's 4 touchdowns. I would have been 3rd, but goodness gracious, 4 touchdowns is crazy. We'll get to that one later. But yeah, I mean, Ryan's team just went nuts on me. It was going through the 1:00 games. It was just so close. It was back and forth. Like Barkley versus Derrick Henry. Henry ended up finishing higher, but it was very good. Fournette outscored Nick Chubb, so it was kind of a wash between our running backs there. Jalen Hurts just absolutely murdered me. Basically, the entire gap difference between our points was Jalen Hurts versus Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton he got usurped by Taysom Hill. What can you say? Wide receiver wise, Debo versus Godwin was a wash. CeeDee Lamb got pretty destroyed by Devontae Adams in that game. But then on the flip side, I had Gabe Davis against Cortland Sutton, smashed him there. Dameon Pierce versus Allen Robinson. Dude, Allen Robinson just hurts right now. So depressing. Oh, goodness. And then Dallas got it for myself as well. I think the only guy I could have possibly thrown in that would have been a better play was Justin Fields at quarterback. But other than that, I started pretty much all the right guys. Just, yeah, unfortunate matchup this last week. All right, so second matchup here, we got Eric versus Ken, the Great Rebuild. So Eric was 2-2 going into the matchup. Ken was 2-2, so it was kind of an important one. Eric ultimately got the win over Ken, 142 to 130. So congrats there. Puts Eric to 3-2, Ken to 2-3. I am 1-4, by the way. Oh, it's been a terrible start to the season. Terrible. Ryan's 4-1, so props to him there. But We'll talk on something here in a little bit. The other trade was by me, so we'll talk on that one here in a minute. But I'm feeling good about my team. I finally got the monkey off my back. I think that I'm going to be turning it around here soon. But yeah, Eric, Geno Smith played by Ken. Gotta love it there. I like Geno Smith a lot, man. He's looking good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he is. I definitely agree.
Still got outscored by Josh Allen, but there's nothing you can do to stop him right now.
No.
Sanders versus Connor was a wash there at the running back position. Breece Hall for Ken, big day versus J.K. Dobbins for Eric. I will say the funniest thing about this, and because this is a home league, I know insider information for all this stuff, right? So Ken had the number 1 overall pick, and he's a massive Michigan State, wherever Ken Walker's from, whichever one that is. Is it Michigan? I think it's the blue one, right? The Wolverines.
Michigan State.
Which one?
Michigan State, the Spartans. They're green.
Well, yeah. Which one is Ken Walker from?
Michigan State.
I thought he was Michigan.
Oh.
Really? Oh, Ken's going to be so mad when he listens to this that I am butchering his team. But that said, we all thought he was going to go Ken Walker because he's a huge fan of that team, right? But he went Breece Hall. And the reason why he told us he wanted to go Breece Hall over Ken Walker was he wanted points now versus points later. hilariously, that was the right pick for the worst possible reason, because Ken was in the great rebuild. You don't need points now, Ken. That was kind of the whole point. It worked out because Breece was the better pick, and we all thought you should take Breece Hall, but you took him for the wrong reason. So fix that piece of it, but good pick. Congratulations, Breece Hall. I was wrong on Breece Hall. I did not think he was going to be this heavily involved this early, but holy mother of God, he looks good.
I do agree with that. I am very surprised that he's been this involved.
Dude, he's got so much burst. It is nuts.
Yeah, I'm starting to be a believer of him, and I don't know how I feel about that, but I kinda like it.
Big advantage there for Eric in the wide receiver core, though. Amari Cooper and Mike Williams over Waddle and Thielen. Waddle kind of got screwed in that one. It was an even dead tie at the tight end position, 0-0 for both guys. Darren Waller and Dalton Schultz both gave you goosers this week, so nobody got an advantage there. Josh Jacobs for Eric was a big play in the flex. ETN looked a little bit better again this week. He was a little bit more bursty. Lazard looked pretty decent. Brandon Cooks for Eric. So, yeah, ultimately, Ken got the victory. Not too many guys on the bench for either player. It looks like that were massive misses. Alec Pierce, I guess, is the only one for Eric. But, again, we talked on Alec Pierce earlier. He looks really good. Hard to trust him right now, but, yeah. Alec Pierce or Brandon Cooks long-term, who do you think?
Alec Pierce all the way.
Sorry, not long term, like as in rank. I mean for this season value wise.
I
phrased that terribly, so I set you up for failure.
Hey, that's fair. If you go quarterback play, I like Matt Ryan better than General Mills there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would have to say Alec
that
Pierce.
Offensive line is so bad though. At least Houston has a good offensive line.
Yeah, I don't like saying. I mean, I would say for this year.
It's close though. It is close.
Yeah, it's
give me Pierce.
Close. I mean,
give me Pierce. Give me the rookie.
Yeah.
It's tough, but give me the rookie. All right, next matchup here we got Braden versus Rob. Rob was looking good. He was coming off a hot streak, but, last couple weeks, I think he's on a 3-game losing streak now. He was 2-0 to start the season, but Rob has now fallen to 2-3, lost to Braden in this one. Braden is 3-2. It's a very competitive league. Like, everyone is right around the same scores right now. It's pretty wild. You look at the big plays here for Braden. Braden absolutely killed Rob, though, by the way. 160-88. Rob put up a me score line. So how does that feel, Rob? You stink. No, I'm just kidding. Braden outscored me this week as well, too. But, yeah, I mean, his team just popped off. Joe Burrow was fine. Austin Eckler, massive monster week there for him. Joe Mixon was fine. Pittman is what he is. He's a solid floor play. Christian Kirk has disappeared. He's been disappointing the last couple weeks. This kind of stinks. 3 weeks in a row he was really good. The last couple weeks, not so good. We'll see if he can get it back on track here against Indy this week. But Travis Kelce, 4 touchdowns. You know what annoys me the most about this? He has 25 yards, 7 catches, 25 yards, 4 touchdowns.
I love it. I love it.
Oh, goodness. He's got Mark Andrews in the flex. Chris Olave, both good plays. So his team just murdered this week. And then conversely, DK went off for Rob. Melvin Gordon was fine, but other than that, it was a stinker week for Rob. Nothing else he really could have done. He could have started, who was it? Oh, where'd he go? Tony Pollard is the only guy on his bench that really made a difference. So yeah, both these guys started pretty much their most optimal lineups, but yeah, just a murdering by Braden there. So congrats to Braden on that one. The heavy hitter matchup this week, the two, now they're both 4-1, but Dan versus James. James was undefeated, 4-0. Dan was coming off the loss against me. He's kind of trying to reel a little bit. But I think he's successfully recovered because he was second highest point scorer on the week yet again. Would have lost to Ryan, just like the finals though last year. So Ryan definitely has that potential to pop off and whoop Dan when needed. But yeah, Dan's team is it's interesting, man. He's got James Robinson last week. He started him over JT because JT's still recovering. McCaffrey is fine. Russ has been down though for Dan. Didn't trust Aaron Rodgers. But on the flip side, he just absolutely murdered James, though. It was 168-91. Cooper Kupp is still murdering people. Stephon Diggs, dude, it's just so disgusting. McCaffrey, Diggs, Kupp, and Jefferson. It's like, I feel like those guys are guaranteed just to give you 100 points on the week. Like, you're just set for 100 points with those guys.
Absolutely.
It's so stupid. I hate it. But then on the other side, for James, it was a rough one. His kicker gave him -2. This is why. Justin Tucker, too. Like, Justin Tucker had 16 points, man. It's so frustrating. And then you got the San Francisco defense giving him 16 points as well. So just monster week from Dan here, pretty much everywhere. T. Higgins was unfortunately a goose for James. He started that game, then got pulled early on in there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire did nothing this week. He's kind of been someone who has relied heavily on touchdowns, but if he doesn't get the touchdowns, he's not going to do that well for you. So it's kind of hit or miss there. You got to keep playing him, but yeah, you need the touchdowns for him to produce. But looking at the bench, there were quite a few guys on James's bench that produced pretty well. Evan Ingram was pretty high versus Freiermuth. You've got someone like Michael Carter, Raheem Mostert. Michael Carter with the 2 vultures. Love to see it. Mariota on the bench. So there's a couple guys, although he started Mahomes, who gave him 30. So there is that. But yeah, Dan takes over first overall again from him, and man, it's a 3-way tie, but we'll get to the standings here in just 1 minute. So and then the last piece of news is we actually have a new manager in the league. So Rick has officially bowed out, and I think we talked about this last week, but Max was getting involved as kind of his co-manager for the team. Well, they just decided why wait until next year to do it. They just decided to make the cut this week after this week's games. Rick did get a win before he left, so ultimately he pulled the upset over Keelan. Both teams are now 1-4. Keelan, it was a close one though, 143-133. Few good performers for Rick. Tom Brady had 20 points. Dalvin Cook, Devonta Smith, man, he's been a PPR monster the last couple of weeks.
He's been. No, I agree with that. Like, I think that's interesting to see how he's going to do going forward. I mean, with like AJ Brown having a couple down. I mean,
it's been down.
It's been down. Like, so it's gonna be interesting to see Eagles do going forward.
Yeah, because they were kind of like that last year, though. If you remember, before they had AJ Brown, some of their receivers would just kind of disappear. Goddard, all those guys, they just kind of took weeks there. So better days are ahead for AJ Brown. But yeah, Devonta's been a machine, man. Every hit, though, makes me just worried about his well-being. On the flip side, though, someone that's really interesting, if you need a cheaper wide receiver in Dynasty right now, Tyler Lockett is someone that is so interesting. Like, Geno's been balling, man. He has been killing it. Lockett, week 1 was a dud, 5 points. But since then, 20, 17, 13, 28. Like, he's been very good. This last week was the first time he's got touchdowns on the season. And, man, it's just tough to count him out. Him and DK have just been rolling the last couple weeks. But, yeah, Keelan's looking good there, at least. So, and then the big thing for Keelan, he didn't have this last week, but now Ken Walker is going to be a massive play for him. So if you hadn't heard, Rashad Penny broke his leg. He is out for the rest of the season. So Ken Walker is going to be the primary starter for Seattle going forward. So, yeah, that's a big add for Keelan. He's got Jeff Wilson, but his RB2 has been Cordero Patterson for so long. Being able to kind of rotate in Ken Walker is going to be huge for him. So, big add there for Keelan. So, ultimately, Rick did end up getting the win before he handed it off. Now, Max is taking over, and he's trying to flip this whole thing for parts. So, that said, before we get into the last trade, and we can talk about that one real quick, I just want to get to the standings. So, currently, there's a three-way tie for first. Dan is in first based on points, but Ryan is right behind him at 4-1, and James is 4-1 as well. Pretty close battle there. Dude, Dan is just absolutely murdering everybody throughout this league. His points are just ridiculous. The fact that I was able to beat him to avoid being 0-5 is hilarious to me. But we have a two-way tie for fourth with Braden and Eric. Both are at 3-2. Eric is starting to rally a little bit here. And then we got two teams at 2-3 with Ken and Rob. Ken is in 6th place right now, so congratulations there. Rob is in 7th. And then there's a three-way tie at 1-4 between Keelan, Max, and myself. I'm in 10th place, man. This is terrible. This is awful.
Bringing up the rear.
I will say the one nice thing is, if you look at it, right, my points for, I'm not last in points for anymore. I'm actually starting to catch up a little bit in points for. I am 8th in points for. I am first by a mile in points against, an absolute mile. Like, literally, Eric is second in points against by 40 points less than me. That is a lot. That is a lot of points. And this is with Dan having a dud against me. Like, people have just been teeing off on me so far. So the reason why I'm enthused about my team is that points against is not going to continue. And if I can start to score points like I did this week, 150, oh man, I'm coming back, baby. Let's go. And I play Braden this week, so dude, if I beat Braden, he's in 4th. It's gonna vault me up to one game within one game. We're early enough. I could go, I could go on a 9-game winning streak and finish 10-4. It's possible.
It's possible, but I'm gonna say this for I'm just gonna say this for all of your league mates. It's not going to happen.
Oh, it's definitely not going to happen. Oh, no. It's definitely not going to happen. I told Ryan, I was like, dude, why could I not play you this week? Literally half of his team is on bye this week. Derrick Henry, Damian Pierce, Devontae Adams. Like, literally half his team is on bye. I was like, really? Right. Really? I lose nobody, and you lose half your team. But, all right, so then the last trade we're going to talk about real quick, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So I traded Max after this week concluded, just yesterday, for Tom Brady. I traded Elijah Moore for Tom Brady because my quarterback has been murdering me. I haven't gotten 10 points from quarterback all year. What is this? BS. Try not to curse. I'm trying not to wake up my kids either. But dude, I had to get a quarterback to even remain competitive. I'm glad I traded for Tom Brady yesterday because the news came out Dak is not playing again this week. He's going to come back next week, which I don't blame them. It's against Philly in the Sunday night game. So yeah, rest up, Dak. We're going to need you back. So I got Tom. Tom is starting to rally. So I like to see that, started a little rough. 10, 9, 14, 26, and 20 the last couple weeks. He's got his weapons back. He's got Pittsburgh. He's got a very soft schedule for the next couple weeks. He started with Dallas and New Orleans, Green Bay. Like, that's a tough matchup for
It is.
With no weapons. That's rough. So Tom Brady is someone that's going to be interesting as the season continues. And then the best part about it is if Tom Brady retires, he's a first-round pick. He's the 111 in our league, the way our rankings work and everything. So basically, if he's top 12 quarterback, he will be or a top 10 quarterback, sorry. If he's top 10, he will be a first-round pick, which I think there's pretty good odds on him finishing top 10 at the end of this year. And, last year he was 3, the year before that 7, so definitely the possibility there. So I do like that, but what do you think about the trade?
I don't hate it. I think you got decent value because I think Elijah Moore is trending in the wrong direction.
I agree. He's the guy that scares me the most out of all those guys because the reason why I wanted to give him up, I have a lot of wide receivers that are unproven right now, and it's possible that Elijah Moore is he ends up being a stud, but I will bet against that. And the reason why is, for whatever reason, Zach Wilson just does not know he exists. Like, literally both games with Zach Wilson, 4 targets in both games. Like, he was averaging 7, 5, and 9 the first 3 weeks. what are we doing here? So 7 target average through the first 3 weeks. Zach Wilson comes back. That drops by half almost. Like, that's not good for someone who is more of a volume play at the wide receiver position. You know, he's an undersized guy. He's 5'10", 170. He's very good. I just don't think that Zach Wilson really cares. So that's what scares me about Elijah Moore.
No, I do agree with that. And plus you get the bonus that, like, if Brady does retire, like, you get like a first round pick. So, you know, I think it's a good risk reward trade.
Yeah, because essentially, Elijah Moore for the 212. If Brady's not top 10, he'd be a second round pick at that point. So,
right.
Yeah, the 212 for Elijah Moore, it's not the best value, but it's okay.
I mean, it's still not bad for
quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, for a quarterback and for a 1-year rental.
You know, the best part about this trade, though, from my perspective, you know, I've hated it because I've had to roster 4 quarterbacks the last couple of weeks because I have Lance and I have Dak, and those guys have both been injured. And then Fields is my only other starter, so I've been kind of streaming guys off the waivers. Well, now I still have Lance and Dak. I have Fields, but I can't trust Dak. Dak's not healthy yet. And I can't trust Fields. Well, now I have Tom Brady, and I hate rostering 4 quarterbacks, but after this year, if Brady retires, which he most likely will, I will have 3 guys, and I will feel very good about those 3 guys, you know. So it's kind of an easy off-road for me for, you know, getting rid of that extra quarterback this year. So I do like that as well. So it just kind of worked out that way, but... All right, so that is week 5. Thank you guys for joining us again. If you made it this far, please go over to wherever you're listening, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. If you're looking for any advice in season, you know, it always takes a couple weeks, but I rally like a mofo. I will say that. I am always better at adjusting on the fly in all these leagues than I am at, kind of predicting. That's where it's a little risky. But that's why I'm happy I'm 6-6 in my starts of the week so far. But let us know what your guys' thoughts are. Again, you can find us over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, at Dynasty Dale. We're happy to answer any questions you guys got going on. And again, if you haven't heard yet, I am partnered with the Let's Talk Sports channel. I'm going to be starting a new podcast with them probably next week. It's going to be a weekly call-in show. So just a little plug there. I will have more information for that after we get a few more of the details sorted out. But me and a co-host are going to be, just doing some community calling questions. So I'm excited about that. And again, when I know some more information, I'll be sure to get that out there on Twitter. So make sure you're following so you can find out. But thank you guys so much for listening. Have a good night.